he's one of our close partners here at Microsoft. Just as a reminder, this event will be recorded, and the recording will be made available at your convenience after the event via email. Please post any questions you may have in the Q&A panel in the top right-hand corner. The moderators will be answering your questions over the course of the webinar. Today's topic is fortifying identity, protecting tokens in Entra ID. Because authentication tokens are a cornerstone of modern identity systems, they're also high valuable targets to attackers. Traditional defense often fail once a token is compromised, enabling an adversary to bypass maybe MFA or even move laterally across systems. In today's briefing, Ryan and Asai will be diving into how some common token thefts happen and show how Microsoft Entra ID and Defender XDR can help you minimize the risk of token thefts, but also detect and investigate token theft incidents. So with that, I'm going to pass it to my peer, Ryan, for him to take over from here. Ryan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Enrique. So just going to do a quick walkthrough of our agenda for today. So today is all going to be about token and token theft protection. We're going to start with some token 101, just kind of explaining the basic mechanics of tokens, what happens during a token theft attack, what are some basic types of token theft attacks, and then we're going to hop into everything that we can use in terms of our layers of defense to help us protect against token theft and token theft replay, right? So that's going to include everything that you can use with Entra ID natively to prevent the use of stolen tokens, how you can minimize token theft with device hardening and compliance, and then we're going to finish out with a introduction to Avanti Consulting with Yasai, as well as some of our upcoming events, as well as Q&A. So let's go ahead and just hop right into it. So let's start with some token 101 and quickly review the mechanics of tokens. A token is an authentication artifact that grants you access to resources, right? You get a token by signing into an identity provider, such as Microsoft Entra ID, using a set of credentials, right? The IDP will respond to a successful sign-in by issuing you a token that describes who you are and what you have permission to do. When you want to access an application or service, you get permission to talk to that resource by presenting your token that's correctly signed by an issuer or trust, which in our case is Entra ID, right? And the software on the client device you're using takes care of all the token handling behind the scenes. So this isn't really something that the end user really needs to worry about or sees. The first token you get is something usually that's called a session token, right? It shows that successfully you've signed into the IDP, how you've signed in. When you sign into an app, you can exchange that session token for an access token, which gives you access to a specific resource for a certain amount of time without having to re-authenticate. To use an analogy, think of like an amusement park, right? The IDP or Entra ID is like a ticket office at the amusement park. You might go up to the ticket office or your IDP, and you might go and buy a park season pass, right? By presenting your ID and getting the season pass. And then you can go around the park, and whenever you want to go on a ride, you might go exchange or show your season pass, and then you get a ticket for that ride specifically, right? So think of the season pass as like a session token and a ride ticket as like an access token. And just as you might be able to buy like a ride pass, season pass, or lifetime pass, each token has a lifetime, right? Usually can be anywhere from 1 hour to 24 hours. Session tokens usually have different and usually much longer lifetimes than access tokens. And on top of that, access tokens lifetimes, even among themselves, can differ very heavily, right? So in our example, the roller coaster ride ticket might last an hour, but maybe the Ferris wheel pass is good for an entire day. Traditionally, longer token lifetimes are more convenient for end users, but riskier from a security perspective, right? And shorter lifetimes are safer because the IDP checks the integrity of the request more often, but then it creates more friction for the end user, right? All these tokens are potentially targets for attackers, and some are more valuable than others, right? While it's bad to lose like your ride pass, it's really, really bad to lose your season park pass, right? An attacker can use your roller coaster ticket to get on a single ride, but if they get access to your season park pass, they can get on any ride for as long as they want. So similarly, if your session tokens get stolen, can give a bad actor a lasting ability to get and generate access tokens. So token theft is still relatively rare, judging strictly by the numbers. In 2024, it was the root cause of less than 5% of all identity compromises, but our data shows that the volume of token replay attacks is growing exponentially year over year. We really think that this will be a major attack vector in the coming years, and the goal of this webinar is to really give you a proactive approach to be ready to meet this threat head on, right? And I think, as part of the data, um, it's seemingly more, I think, in my opinion, more rare than it seems because we haven't always been the best at catching these kinds of token theft attacks, right? It's something that's very hard to detect from the end user, but we're getting better and better at detecting these types of attacks with the tools that we have today, and we really think that these will only continue to grow. So how does token theft work, right? Attackers steal our tokens or try to steal our tokens so they can impersonate you and access your data for as long as that stolen token lives. To do this, they need to get access to where a token is stored. So that can be on the client, in proxy servers, in application or network logs, and they try to seal it, acquire it, and replay it from somewhere else. When an attacker steals your session token, right, it's like picking your pocket after you've purchased your all-season park pass or your ride pass, right? And because the token is digital, it's like stealing the pass from your pocket, making a photocopy, and then putting the original back in your pocket. The attacker can then use their copy to get unlimited new access tokens to keep stealing your data. And to the end user, right, the token seems fine, even though an attacker is using an illegitimate copy of it. And it might take a while for them to ever see or determine that anything is wrong, even if they ever do. There are two basic types of token thefts, on device and off device. We're just going to cover a couple basic types. There's lots of different kind of token theft attacks now. The first one on device usually starts with the end user installing malware from like a malicious link or attachment. The malware on the client device then uses various techniques such as memory scraping or file system extraction to steal tokens stored on the client. And then the attacker takes the token and replays it from another device to gain access, right? The second most basic type of attack of token theft is off-device token theft. An adversary in the middle is one of the most common forms of this. AITM or adversary in the middle is a type of attack that aims to basically intercept authentication between users in a legitimate authentication service. The attackers will position themselves between a user and the service to steal credentials and intercept MFA in order to capture the session token. The attackers can then replay the session with the stolen session token before the token expiration time and impersonate the user without basically having any kind of intervention or having to satisfy MFA, right? Because the end user has already done so. So a typical attacker in the middle or adversary in the middle attack would be like this indirect proxy method, which the attacker presents the target with a website that maybe mimics the sign-in page of the targeted application, right? So this might be like a fake Entra ID sign-in page. It might be a fake sign-in page for a specific SaaS application. The sign-in page that's mock basically contains the resources loaded from an attacker-controlled server, and then the attacker server will initiate an authentication request or session with the authentication provider of the target application using the victim's credentials, right? And then once the user kind of completes that request and validates the MFA, the attacker uses the same MFA token in the initiated session with the authentication provider. And then following the successful authentication, the session token is granted to the attacker, and then a victim is usually redirected elsewhere. So, with all that being said, there's lots of different and lots of different origins and sources and types of token theft attacks, and really with trying to protect ourselves against token theft attacks, there's no silver bullet, right? Everything that we're doing here is layers and defense in depth, right? So we're really trying to give you as many layers of defense as you can implement to really reduce your attack surface and make it much more difficult to steal your tokens, make your users much less susceptible to token theft, and make it much more difficult to use those tokens if replayed, right? So this kind of brings us to how we're going to structure the rest of our webinar today, which is kind of going to be in 3 sections. So first, I'm going to be going over how we can use our native protections in Entra ID to prevent the use of stolen tokens, right? So these are going to be protections in Entra ID such as the token protection, continuous access evaluation, IP whitelisting, Entra ID protection. And then I'll pass it over to Yasai, who will be talking about how we can minimize the risk that tokens are stolen in the first place, right? And so these will be mostly related to things like our device hardening, endpoint monitoring. These will be a lot of it will be on the kind of endpoint level, and how we can protect those. And then finally, what we can do in case of a breach or in case our tokens are used, and how we can monitor for that, how we can investigate that with something like the Entra ID protection portal and Sentinel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hop into our first section here, which is going to be how we can prevent the use of stolen tokens with Entra ID. Right, and we're going to kind of start basic and go into some of the more advanced features, but starting at the super basic level, right? And these first couple of items won't necessarily directly prevent token theft or token replay, but these will go very far in terms of kind of building good user behavior and making your users less susceptible to falling victim to something like a adversary in the middle attack, right? So the first thing really is to require strong authentication and to push your users towards stronger authentication methods, right? In the last few years, we've really recommended as a super basic security feature, and I think most in the audience have seen that we've even started implementing this in some of our administrative portals, is just requiring basic MFA, right? We still see a lot of customers using password only or some of the more legacy and less safe methods of MFA, such as SMS and voice. We're really pushing customers to move towards the better and best kind of MFA methods, right? So at a bare minimum, using something like number matching push notifications with Microsoft Authenticator. We at a kind of a best phishing resistant level, right? We push customers towards using something like a Windows Hello for Business, using FIDO2 security keys, using pass keys stored in Microsoft Authenticator, right? All of these methods are going to be fully phishing resistant, and require some sort of either cryptographic bind with the device that they're stored on, or some form of proof of presence, right? So that's why these methods are fully phishing resistant. They cannot be socially engineered, right? And so these methods will really kind of give you that just first layer of defense in terms of protecting those user accounts from being breached, right? And just as a kind of a quick side note on how we do things at Microsoft, all of our authentication and sign-ins are being driven by passwordless phishing resistant methods, right? So vast majority of the time, all of us sign in with our corporate devices with Windows Hello for Business, right? We just look at the camera, signs us in, and that single signs us on to all of our corporate applications. So whether that's Microsoft or our third-party SaaS apps that we're using. And then in cases where we might have to use like a mobile device or let's say a personal iPhone, we are required to use our passkeys in the Microsoft Authenticator app, right? Because we are using, kind of fully passwordless and phishing resistant methods, this is built in this positive end user behavior, right? Where we're used to never ever having to worry about entering our password. Most of the time we don't even have to enter our username anywhere because it's mostly driven by the PRT in Windows. And it brings this good behavior where if I ever come into a scenario where I'm asked to enter my username and password, that makes me take a step back and I'm like, whoa, like am I being phished? Because this is not normally the kind of workflow that I have to go through, right? So it really kind of ingrains this end user behavior of taking a step back before they're entering credentials to potentially like some kind of indirect proxy